So it's been a chaotic week for the games industry, to say the least. It's felt like the entire thing has almost like imploded. There's been so much negative news. But today I'm going to focus on one particular piece of negative news. And I think, if I'm honest, I think I've got probably a bit of an unpopular opinion. So the other day, this was posted to the PlayStation blog. Physical disc production ending in January 2028 for new games releasing on PlayStation consoles. This makes sense now in light of the GTA 6 release news the other week that the physical disc editions wouldn't have a disc in and would just have a code. At the time, I thought that it was mostly to mitigate leaks, and that might still be part of it, but it seems that they probably had prior knowledge from PlayStation about this whole thing. So it says, in response to shifting trends in consumer preference, new games will be released on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. As consumer preferences and the broader entertainment industry continue to shift away from physical discs to digital, physical game disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will be discontinued starting in January 2028. Following this date, new games will be available on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only. This tradition has no impact on games that are already released or will be releasing prior to January 2028 in disc format. This is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. This tradition will enable us to align more closely with how most of our community prefers to access and play games today. So I think it's fair to say that this blog post that was released on July the 1st went down like a lead balloon. I have not seen a backlash towards PlayStation, at least. I think probably the last time that I can remember something similar to this would be when Helldivers came out on PC and you had to log in through your PlayStation login or something like that. So obviously this is like affected different players in different ways. I think a lot of the creator community for games, podcasts that you listen to, people that I follow on Twitter, for example, they tend to be from the generation prior to me, where physical media was much more of a common thing. And I think it's more ingrained in they sort of associate it goes hand in hand with the games industry. For me, for example, so I was born in 1998, and I feel like I'm right smack bang in the middle of the two generations, one being physical primary and one being digital primary. My cousin, for example, who is 18 years old, I highly doubt that he's bought a digital game in his life. I started on physical. Obviously, I had a 360 to begin with, but more recently, I've been pretty much playing entirely on my PS5 Pro, and I've got the digital version. So I haven't bought a physical game for that or for anything else in a long time. The only real exception is for something like, let's say, that I'm not 100% sure on whether I'll like. I think physical works better because you can either return it or you can resell it. But aside from that, I've been pretty much digital for a long time. So when this news broke, I was actually in the office for my work, and I read it to some of the people that I was sat with, and their reactions, I think, said a lot about this generation, my generation and below. They weren't really shocked. I fully get where people are coming from, why people are annoyed. There's lots of reasons why physical is good to keep around. Stuff like reselling, stuff like sort of keeping an archive of old games, whereas on digital, it can kind of like be turned off, which for the record, I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's a good thing. But to me, this whole backlash is justified, but it's also like, in my head, it was going to happen sooner or later at some point. I was listening to IGN's podcast Unlocked this morning, and Ryan McCaffrey was talking about how he was kind of expecting the Project Helix to be all digital anyway, because it is essentially going to be like a PC in Xbox form. I kind of feel torn on this, because I do get where people are coming from, and I get why there's a backlash. And I'm not gonna be on the side of Sony as a corporation. Like I obviously understand where gamers are coming from. But for me personally, like I just wanted to voice as someone in my generation that this is kind of expected, and I can't say I'm surprised, and I can't say that it's going to make a huge difference to my day-to-day life as a gamer. I think just to try and play devil's advocate, obviously the people who really, really believe in physical media, there are lots of benefits to it. And actually, just on a side note, there was supposedly a rumor or a leak that came out yesterday about how Xbox apparently last year were going to have like a whole marketing thing comparing physical to digital. I think for physical, like, you know, people like sharing games, so being able to give your disc to someone. There's the whole archive thing about keeping a record of games that maybe could be deleted if they were all digital. You can obviously resell them and get some of the money back. You can get them pre-owned and get them cheaper. And I think all of those points are valid. But on the other side, the benefits for digital are that you can preload it, it's easier, you don't have to change discs. I think really it's about convenience. And for me at least, that's something that I have increasingly gone towards over the last few years. I would say since this generation, I think in the Xbox One I did have a fair few discs, and even towards the beginning of the Series X generation I had a few more discs as well. But I think increasingly so, I've been getting digital. I think Game Pass doesn't help because it gets you used to having digital. So yeah, I'm practically entirely digital now, which is why this news didn't really shock me or massively affect me. But I think it's a fair point, and I think people, pushing back at Sony, I think is very valid. One thing I do think though is worth mentioning is ownership. Now, it's something, if I'm honest, it's something that hasn't really... It doesn't cross my mind on a day-to-day, and I think maybe that, again, that's like a generational thing. Like, I buy a lot of my games digitally. I've never experienced like it being turned off or it being taken away from you. The only game that I can think of off the top of my head that I'm aware that's done that is Forza, to do with licenses. And I haven't experienced that myself, and I do think that that is annoying. And I think if we're going into this all digital future, which in my mind is inevitable, I think possibly we need to think about like how we can assure ownership. Like if we're moving to digital, and if it's something that we have to do, which if I'm honest, I think is almost inevitable. If it wasn't going to happen in 2028, you know, I'd have been surprised if we'd have gone into 2030 and physical discs was still a thing. But obviously, like, ownership is an issue, and I wouldn't want to lose the ownership of my games. I know that I'm here sort of banging the drum for digital, but like I get it. I get the whole ownership thing, and I wonder whether there's a way that they can try and... I don't know how you could though, because obviously like on PC it's different, because you could hypothetically get the code, like the whole sort of files, but you couldn't really do that on console. So I don't really know how that ownership issue is solved. And whilst we're talking about ownership, I think something that's really interesting that's come out this week that is relevant to this is supposedly Xbox have been working on a system where it digitizes your physical library, which is something that I've mentioned previously, that I didn't know how like high in the sky that concept was, whether that was even possible. But apparently that's something that they're working on, and I've got to admit, if that is something that they bring in, let's say from 2028, they've still got a year and a half to work on this. If they bring in a system, both Xbox and PlayStation, where you can somehow like type a code in or a product number of the disc that you've got, somehow show that you own it, and it gives you digital ownership of that game. Like, I think that's a really cool idea. I have a handful of discs that, to be honest, I never use. And if I had it digitally on my console, I'd probably play the games more. And there's even an example, like stuff like Red Dead 2, for example. I've actually, and this is stupid, but this is me, I've actually gone so far as to buy the game digitally, even though I have it physical, just because I prefer it. So if there was a way to convert a physical library to digital, that would be sick. Like, I think that would be really cool, and I think it wouldn't appease the gamers that are annoyed by this news, but I think it would at least go some way. I also think, like, to be honest, I think they probably could work on an external disk drive and bring that out for the next generation, both Xbox and PlayStation. Like, I don't think that would be, doesn't have to fit in like the whole PlayStation 5 Slim and Pro, where it kind of looks like the, I think even like just like an external disk drive, like something like the Apple one that they don't do anymore. That used to be like a little disk drive that you plugged into the USB port. Something like that. Like, I think that would appease people at least, and it would mean that I think that is the way to go. I think the consoles will be all digital, but maybe there's a way to appease the people that are really big on physical. But I don't think that will solve the fact that games won't be sold physically. And I think that probably is something that they're not going to reverse. I could see them doing something similar to what Rockstar did with Red Dead, where they, like, collector's editions become like a collector's tin that doesn't include the game, so you can buy whichever version digitally you want and then get the collector's tin. I could see that being a thing, but I think that's probably the extent of what physical games media will look like in like 5 or 10 years time. I'd love to know, you know, if you're watching this, comment down below, let me know, like, are you part of the generation that I'm sort of right at the edge of, where digital is pretty much standard, or are you part of the generation where physical is like so intertwined with your association with gaming that you can't imagine it not being physical, or a collector, or, you know, it is really difficult, and I don't know how they're going to do it. But the thing is, like, for me at least, I think I'm right on the edge of that generation, and I haven't bought an album or a single physically in probably 10 years plus. I haven't bought a DVD or a Blu-ray for probably 10 years plus. Games I have bought physically, but the last one I bought physical was Battlefield 6 last year, and the sole reason I bought it physical, and I returned it very quickly, the sole reason I bought it physical was because I bought it on Xbox with the idea that I wasn't, and I'm still not for the record, and this is a whole other video, but at the time Xbox was on extremely shaky ground, and I just didn't feel confident enough that Xbox as a platform would exist going forward for me to want to buy a digital game on that ecosystem. And pretty soon after that, I bought a PS5 Pro. I ended up buying the game on PS5 Pro, Battlefield. So it's an unpopular opinion, and I'm sure that many people watching will disagree if you're from the generation where physical was more prominent. But I really don't know how they could have avoided it. Like, I think it was going to happen at some point. And as I say, I would have been surprised if we got to 2030 and physical games were still a thing. I think the next consoles are going to be all digital, so why would they make discs? January 2028 as well. If the rumors are true that the next consoles are supposedly coming out in autumn 2027, that means that the January 2028 stop doing discs will be like 3 or 4 months after the consoles, probably less than that actually, 2 months after the consoles come out. So why would there be discs? Possibly to try and find a middle ground, like sell some sort of disc drive that you can plug into the console to appease people, to be able to let people play their 360 games, for example, or people play their PS4 games. And I think that's probably a happy medium. And I'd be surprised if that's not something that they're already doing even prior to this backlash. I can't see them reversing it though. I think they'll just stay quiet and kind of let it blow over. And to be honest, by the sounds of it, I think Xbox are going to do their job for them and probably replace the news cycle over the next few days / weeks anyway, because what's going on at Xbox is not good. But that's a whole other video. If you have enjoyed this video, I'm doing more content like this essentially. So gaming content, if you're interested in my opinion on the latest gaming news, on games commentary, anything like that, then please do subscribe. I would appreciate it. Depending on your opinion on this whole thing, comment and let me know what you think. I'll actually engage with you in the comments, and I want to hear what your opinion is. Like, am I just chatting a load of rubbish? Like, I don't know, but I'm just voicing my opinion. But thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.